Hello and welcome to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith. Today we delve into the first of 5 episodes dealing with Abraham. We're starting with Genesis 11, 27 through 28 to answer a seemingly simple yet intriguing question. How could Abraham's family be from Ur of the Chaldees when elsewhere it says his ancestors were from Haran? The solution seems straightforward, but is it a bit more complicated? Is it a question that stems from different interpretations and understandings of ancient geographical locations, cultural context, and biblical narratives? These are all fascinating discussions we'll have today, backed by some impressive scholarly hypotheses. As usual, I'll present various opinions from my research and then conclude with my own thoughts. Show notes will include links to all we discuss. Are you ready to dive in? All right, let's learn together. Let's start by looking at Genesis 11, 27 through 28 from the New Living Translation, and I quote, "This is the account of Terah's family. Terah was the father of Abram, who we will eventually know as Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran was the father of Lot. But Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, the land of his birth, while his father Terah was still living." All right, just a couple of points of clarification here. Firstly, in this section of the Bible, he is referred to as Abram, but for clarity's sake, we will refer to him throughout this podcast episode by his later name given by God, Abraham. Secondly, Abraham has an older brother named Haran. Haran also refers to the town in which they eventually settled. I will attempt to make it clear when I am referring to the town or the individual. Now, to the problem as defined by the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. There is an apparent conflict as to where Abraham is really from. Genesis 11:28 says Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees, that's in today's southern Iraq, but Genesis 29:4 claims he is from Haran, that's in today's northern Iraq. All right, the solution from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties is this. This conflict is easily resolved. Abraham's family originated in Ur, but later migrated to Haran, where God called him, Genesis 11:31 through 12:1. It is not unusual that Abraham would look back to Haran, where he had lived until he was 75 years old, as his homeland. Also, he quite naturally refers to the children of his 2 older brothers, Nahor and Haran, as part of his family. Back to me. Outside of his birth, the Bible is silent about the early life of Abraham. That aside, the question of Abraham being originally from the Ur of the Chaldees seems pretty straightforward, according to the solution given by the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. So why is there confusion to begin with? It boils down to this. The argument that Abraham might be from Haran instead of Ur of the Chaldees stems from different interpretations and understandings of ancient geographical locations, cultural context, and biblical narratives. From my research, there are 4 reasons why there is a debate. First, let's talk about textual interpretation. To me, this is the most important and interesting of the 4 objections to Abraham being from Ur of the Chaldees. Some scholars interpret the text to suggest that Abraham's call from God occurred in Haran, making it seem like his journey started there rather than Ur. Genesis 11:31 mentions that Terah took his family from Ur to Haran, which could imply that the family was originally from Haran and had temporarily moved to Ur. Several scholars have interpreted the text of Genesis 11:31 and Genesis 12:1 through 4 to suggest that Abraham's call from God occurred in Haran. Very briefly, here are 4 scholars and their perspectives. First, Martin Noth. In his work on the Pentateuch, Noth suggests that the call of Abraham in Genesis 12:1 through 4 could be seen as occurring in Haran. He emphasizes the importance of Haran in the narrative and suggests that the call to leave for Canaan might have been issued there. Second, Gerhard von Rad. Von Rad, in his commentary on Genesis, discusses the possibility that the narrative implies Abraham's call came while he was in Haran. He notes that the text in Genesis 11:31 through 12:4 seems to present Haran as a significant starting point for Abraham's journey to Canaan. Third, John Van Seters. Van Seters, in his work on the Abraham narrative, argues that the structure and sequence of the text suggests that Haran played a pivotal role in the story of Abraham's call and departure. He points out that Haran is mentioned multiple times and appears to be a place of significance for the family of Terah and Abraham. And four, E.A. Speiser. In his Anchor Bible commentary on Genesis, Speiser discusses the textual indications that Abraham's divine call might have been received in Haran. He highlights the movement of Terah's family from Ur to Haran and suggests that the call in Genesis 12, 1-4 can be read as taking place in Haran. Back to me. These scholars and others have explored the possibility that Haran, rather than Ur, might be the location where Abraham received his call from God based on their interpretations of the textual and historical context. However, this view is rejected by most scholars today. Research of this type, concerning Haran as the place of origin, which we just covered, occurred in the 1960s and 1970s. Again, the traditional interpretation that Abraham's call came in Ur remains widely accepted now. Second, we have the historical and archaeological context. The identification of Ur of the Chaldees with the famous Sumerian city of Ur has been debated. Some suggest that Ur of the Chaldees might refer to a different location, potentially closer to Haran. There is evidence of a significant Hurrian presence in the region around Haran during Abraham's time, leading some to argue that the patriarchal narratives might be rooted in that cultural context. There are 5 sources arguing for this interpretation that I found: H.W.F. Saggs, Cyrus H. Gordon, Albright and Glueck, Thomas L. Thompson, and Donald J. Weissman. They each believe in their own way that the Ur of the Chaldees might be in northern Mesopotamia, near the region of Haran, due to linguistic evidence or the possibility of another Ur in that area. This view remains a minority opinion, but it highlights the complexity and ongoing debate surrounding the identification of ancient biblical sites. The traditional view that identifies Ur with the well-known Sumerian city in southern Mesopotamia remains the most widely accepted interpretation today. Third, let's explore the cultural and traditional factors. Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions sometimes differ in their emphasis on Abraham's origins and the significance of Ur and Haran in his story. Some traditions may emphasize Haran due to its role in the family's journey and as a significant place in Abraham's narrative, including the death of Terah and the call of Abraham. I found 5 sources arguing for this interpretation: John Van Seters, Thomas L. Thompson, Niles Peter Lemke, Mark S. Smith, and Robert Carl Noose. These scholars argued that cultural and traditional factors, including the importance of Haran in the collective memory of the Israelites, may have influenced the way that the story of Abraham was told and preserved. This perspective highlights the role of cultural heritage and regional significance in shaping biblical narratives. Again, I did not find the arguments convincing, but they were interesting in how it shaped the storytelling narrative. Lastly, let's talk about geographical confusion. The name Ur could have referred to several different locations in the ancient Near East. The exact identification of Ur of the Chaldees is still subject to scholarly debate. Haran was a well-known city in the ancient world, making it a plausible candidate for Abraham's origin in the absence of precise geographical data. Again, interesting, but not convincing to me. It's intriguing that most of what we discussed today, that Abraham was from Haran and not the Ur of the Chaldees, are examples from 1960s and 1970s research. Despite these arguments, the traditional and most widely accepted view today, based on the biblical text, is that Abraham was originally from Ur of the Chaldees, with Haran being a significant stop on his journey to Canaan. Now, this is important. When you look at a map, Haran was about halfway from Ur to Canaan when following along the Fertile Crescent, so you can see how the travel progressed. Lastly, there are 2 additional scripture verses to buttress the claim that Abraham was from the Ur of the Chaldees when he received his call from God. First is Genesis 15:7, and I quote, "Then the Lord told him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession," close quote. And second is Stephen's speech in Acts 7:2-4, and I quote, "This was Stephen's reply. Brothers and fathers, listen to me. Our glorious God has appeared to our ancestor Abraham in Mesopotamia before he settled in Haran. God told him, 'Leave your native land and your relatives and come into the land that I will show you.' So Abraham left the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran until his father died. Then God brought him here to the land where you now live," close quote. Virtually all serious scholars today accept this view as I do. Bottom line, Abraham was from Ur of the Chaldees, receiving his call from God, and eventually settled with his family in Haran before leaving for Canaan. To me, it points to a larger picture here concerning scholarly research. The amount of substantive and accurate biblical scholarship is happening today, and for that we are fortunate to be able to read and share it. That's all for today's episode. Next week, we'll cover our second of 5 episodes on Abraham with Genesis 11:32. We'll explore if Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran, or was he 135 years old? Join us as we dive deep into this fascinating mystery. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to all the research we discussed today. Thanks for listening to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. You may reach out to us at our website, BibleDifficultiesandAnswers.podbean.com, or you may reach out to me directly at our email address, BibleDifficultiesandAnswers@gmail.com, with any questions, comments, concerns, fits of righteous indignation, or just to say hi. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend or two as well. And also write a review and give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, or any of your venues of choice. It really does help get the word out about the most amazing book ever written. Again, I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, I wish you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.